welcome to a special EWTN bookmark. Our guest author is Anthony DeStefano. We'll talk to him about a couple of his works entitled I Just Can't Take It Anymore, Encouragement When Life Gets You Down, and also The Donkey That No One Could Ride. Welcome, Anthony, to EWTN's bookmark. Great to have you here. You've been here several times with a couple of different books over the years.
Thanks for having me back.
Travel Guide to Heaven, 10 Prayers God Always Says Yes To. This Little Prayer of Mine and Little Star. Let's talk about those two initially, because these two books we're talking about today are sort of kids' books. One, I would say, definitely is.
Yes.
One, not so much. You got out of the Travel Guide and the 10 Prayer. Those were very popular books.
Yes.
They were very successful. What made you change?
I've always wanted to write children's books. I've always been attracted to the idea of writing books for kids. You know, Walt Disney said, you know, one of the highest objects in life is to make children happy, and I go along with that. So I've always wanted to write books for kids, and the first chance I got, I did. It took a while. The children's book market is very tough to break into, and even after I'd had a couple of best-selling adult books, they didn't want to take a chance on me. I really had to push through to get
So
that.
it's actually harder to get a children's book published, really, than an adult book?
It is. It's not that they're harder to write. It's that so many people out there have written children's books.
Yeah, everybody, Grandma used to tell this story, and this would make a wonderful book.
Exactly. So there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more submissions, and so, you know, to actually break through that and get them to choose your book, it's pretty difficult.
And it is easier, I'm assuming, now that you've had a couple of children's books that have worked, right? I'm assuming.
Now, finally, it's easier.
Okay.
But even still, it's difficult. They're always.
So how do they view you when you show up? How do they view you as an author?
They don't know what to make of me. Still, they know that I'm writing spiritual books. They know that I'm Catholic. They know that I'm writing adult books.
You're involved with Priests for Life.
Yes, they know I'm involved in all these causes, and at the same time, I'm writing these popular children's books. And now I have what's called a gift book, which is sort of almost a hybrid. They don't know quite what to make of me, but they know that I think they know that there's some value there.
Has there ever been a concern by a publisher who thought, you know, well, my concern is because of your connection with that Priests for Life organization, Father Frank Pavone, and that kind of thing, that, you know, people might just think these are kind of really just pro-life-y books.
I don't think
not for the general audience.
So far, I haven't had that experience. Most of these publishers are interested in whether or not the books are going to sell.
That's what they want to know.
And that the green is the bottom line for them. And so they'll overlook practically anything, I think, if they think that you've got a good commercial
Have you ever had anything in one of your children's books that, let's say, was, because obviously there's a positive reinforcement here, certainly in the second book, The Donkey That No One Could Ride, is an overtly Christian Catholic story.
Sure. And there are pro-life undertones of all this too. In Little Star and in The Donkey That No One Could Ride, they're both about little characters that are small and have value even though they're small. So there's a pro-life theme throughout, and of course in my adult books as well. So you always get that in when you can.
But not quite as overt, and nobody's pushing back saying this is a little too much.
No, and if they did, I'd push back just as strongly.
Well, let me ask you, let's deal first with this cute little book, I Just Can't Take It Anymore. I mean, this is the kind of book, you see a little child's faces, we'll show you on the screen, beautiful, and the illustrations throughout of all the little pictures, you know, heartwarming, and they kind of reveal basic emotions. But basic emotions we as adults really can feel, maybe even more than the kids do.
Yes, and I wrote that book primarily for adults. I wrote that book for adults who are hurting, who are going through pain. You know, we all have so many problems: frustration, stress, overwhelm, problems at work, problems with relationships. And you know, as an author, you mentioned I've written a few books. For some reason, people tend to think that you're smart when you're an author, and they come up to you and they ask you all kinds of questions. Of course, we know that's not true. There are a lot of authors out there.
We have very smart authors on this show.
On this
you
program,
included.
Yes.
You included.
On this program, you do. But out there are authors that aren't, and some of the people who know me would include me in that category too. Right. Nevertheless, people come up to you and they ask you for advice sometimes, and you always feel a little bit inadequate. You want to be able to help, though, and especially when it comes to the subject of pain and suffering. You know, there are no soundbite answers. There are a lot of good things we could say, but I thought, wouldn't it be great to put a bunch of valuable, true things that can actually inspire and help people who are going through any kind of pain, put all those together in one little book, so that you don't have to think. You could just hand someone a book and it would cheer you up, sort of like an instantaneous painkiller. And that's the purpose of this book. So it was written for adults, But as you know, I do always try to write as simply as possible, and sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. In this particular case, hopefully I've succeeded, because a lot of people have told me that their kids like it too.
Great. This is dedicated to Kimberly, whose courageous, humorous, and faith-filled response to suffering inspired this book. Who's Kimberly?
That's my wife. That's my wife, and she's gone through plenty of problems with family illnesses herself. So, and also, actually, I should say that she inspired this book in more than one way, because one time when she was going through a lot of problems with her dad, who has Alzheimer's disease, a terrible, terrible disease, I wanted to console her, and I said something that is very true, but sometimes when you say something consoling, it sort of rings like a cliche. I said something to her like, well, you know, God only gives you what you can handle. And she looked right back at me and she said, well, if God only gives you what you can handle, he must have me confused with somebody else.
And that's actually the third picture in here, but if that's true, you must have me confused with somebody else.
The second she said that, I realized that that's the way to write this book, to make it funny, make it humorous, acknowledge that there are all kinds of problems, and just take a humorous attitude towards it. And after that, it was like an epiphany, and I wrote the book very quickly.
Right, right. Even simple things like I have the most horrible hair day. Some of these are first world problems, but other ones are deeper than that. Even one is everyone has abandoned me. Even my pet died.
Yeah.
And people, my life is just one big mess.
When
you're out and about, I mean, is that one of the things, is that a central theme you find with people? It's just this feeling that my life's a mess?
I think everybody has that problem. You know, life is difficult. The world is a beautiful place, but it's very, very hard, and especially in this information age that we're living in with so much information coming at us and so many things we have to do. I think everybody is stressed and overworked, and everybody at one time or another feels like their life is a mess.
Right. This one struck me, it's a little girl looking up at the binoculars, say, sometimes I wonder if God is really up there, or even worse, if he doesn't just care. Which do you think people fear the most?
That's a very, very good question. I think they go both ways. I think, you know, most people believe in God. There's an increasing number of atheists, as you know, and that's a problem that we all have to deal with here as believers.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
You
live up in New York.
The secularism.
The secularism, you know.
It's just the increasing secularism in society, you know, and it's constantly being foisted on us. The atheists today are getting more and more aggressive with their campaigns. At Christmas time, you know, they put up signs that saying, why believe in a myth? They're just getting bolder and bolder. And, but I think that most people still believe in God, but I think that even those of us who are committed Christians, when we face suffering in life, sometimes we have a tendency to say, oh God, where are you? Does God even care? It's very human.
The other thing that struck me too, that these two hit, I wonder, is God trying to test me? Because if he is, it would be nice if he could make the test a little easier. I know one time a comedian said, if he wants to test us, why doesn't he give us a written? But, and that's the other one. Is he trying to cure me of some problem I have? Because if he is, I wish the medicine he's giving me wasn't so hard to swallow. Isn't that a lot of people wonder not only why this happens to them, but it seems to be what they need to do to move past this seems more difficult than the problem itself.
Yeah, I tried to put all the different things that are true about suffering. God sometimes does test us. God does use pain to make us grow. You know, no pain, no gain. You know, he uses pain to make us mature and grow. And of course, God always pulls good out of bad. You know, every bad situation can lead to something good if you have faith. So I try to put all of these in one book. So there's really not a lot of fluff in there. It's a comical and funny approach, but really there's a message of deep spiritual consolation there.
Right, you say, or is it maybe that God wants me to stop ignoring him and start paying attention to the things that really matter in life, and then you go, and that's when you go into like praying more, helping those less fortunate than me, saying sorry for things. So essentially you kind of build up to that point and then roll that out, right?
C.S. Lewis said, you know, God whispers to us in our pleasures, but shouts to us in our pain. Pain is the great megaphone of life. So yes, usually when we're experiencing pain, it means that God, you know, not that God is causing that pain, but he is using it to make us change.
Right. And you also have here, because if God really wants me to do those things, I'll try my best to start right now. But then again, maybe God has something else in mind. Maybe there's a bigger plan that I can't see. Has that been your experience in your life?
Always. Oh, I think everyone, looking back, you see that the really tough things you had to go through in life, if it wasn't for those tough things, you would have never gotten to where you are now. The seeds for every great thing are contained in your failures. And sometimes you can't see that as you're going through it, but later on you can see it. And sometimes it remains a mystery until we go to heaven, when all will be revealed.
Now, just talking practically, you've got all of these pictures. How do you decide which kids and families are going to be? Are these stock pictures? Were they shot specifically for the book? What involvement did you have in casting that?
I have to tell you, it was a ball putting together this book. In fact, I was helped by one of the EWTN alumni, Andy Schmallen.
Oh, sure.
He was a great friend, and he does work for Priests for Life as well.
Right, sure.
And we went through thousands and thousands of stock photos trying to find the perfect photo for each of these captions. And when we couldn't find a perfect photo, we went out and we did a casting call, and we took pictures ourselves. There's one little boy in there that makes an appearance 4 or 5 times.
I noticed him right here.
We needed a little chubby boy. Why? Because a lot of people have problems with overeating. They can't lose weight. I'm one of those people. And
meet the club here. Yeah, right.
We wanted a little boy, but he had to be funny and adorable. And it was difficult finding a boy like this. So we did several interviews. I met with 6 or 7 kids. They weren't right. Finally, one day, a little boy walks into my office, followed by his parents, and he was, a little chubby, a little disheveled. And the first words out of his mouth, the first thing he said to me, he didn't even say hello. He said, "Do you want to hear me burp the alphabet? I can burp the alphabet." And he proceeds to burp the ABCs. And I looked at him and I said, "Kid, you're hired."
Yeah. Well, he's got a rascally
Yes.
character that comes across in his face, especially that shot of him with all those hot dogs in the book. And of course, you close out at the end of the book that basically, no matter how overwhelming they may seem now, meaning your problems, if I only put my trust in Him.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the key
message,
to all suffering? And even the worst, I find that when I'm going through the really worst kinds of pain and suffering, sometimes the only thing you could do is just say, "Jesus, I trust in you." And you could say it a million times.
Divine mercy comes in handy. Right?
Exactly, and that's the only thing that could help.
Right. That's I just can't take it anymore. Encouragement when life gets you down. Now let's move over to something that's a little more directly for kids and kind of reminds me a little more of the Star kind of book that you did. The Donkey That No One Could Ride, Anthony DeStefano, illustrated by Richard Caudry from New York Times bestselling artist. And one thing I was going to notice, I've said, so these are different illustrations than the Star, which were very nice.
Yes.
Why'd you decide to change illustrators?
I've been blessed by working with the best illustrators, really. And Richard Caudry is a New York Times bestselling illustrator. He did all the Marley and Me books, which sold like a gazillion copies. And the reason why I went to Richard is he specializes in animals. And he does these wonderful animals. And I knew that for this book about the donkey that no one could ride, the donkey that Jesus rode into Jerusalem, I would need a very beautiful, sad, poor, vulnerable-looking donkey. And I wanted to get someone who was the absolute best at doing animals, and he is.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I first saw the Christmas star, and then the donkey, usually I relate that to Christmas, because you think about the donkey that took Mary and Joseph, and there's some stories that they've had before and cartoons that have been done about the donkey who shows up at the virgin birth, but it didn't connect right away about Palm Sunday and the donkey, which is really what this turns out to be.
That's right. Yeah, before Jesus went into Jerusalem, he instructed his disciples, as you know, to go to the next town and that they would find a young donkey, a colt that no one had ever ridden, and he'd be tied to a post. He told them to untie the donkey and bring the donkey to him, and that's the donkey that he rode into Jerusalem. Now, there's all kinds of reasons, theological reasons, why he chose to ride on a donkey that no one had ever ridden on. The donkey was obviously consecrated for a very holy purpose, and Jesus wanted to be a king who arrived in humility on a donkey, a king of peace. But of course, from the point of view of writing a children's book, I wanted to come up with a reason why that donkey had never been ridden before. Right. And to me, the obvious reason was, well, he's just too small and too weak, and he couldn't carry anyone.
And that's really what the precursor of the story and the whole build-up to when he actually meets our Lord.
That's right. He's too scrawny, he's too small, he's too weak, he's afraid, he could never carry anyone, and of course he meets Jesus, and that changes.
And again, relating back to kind of your Christmas Star book with, again, the same idea, as you alluded to earlier, the idea of someone who's small and sees themselves as inconsequential, but yet that's not how God sees them.
Yes, this is one of the great, most important themes of childhood. You know, when you're children, you're small, you're weak, you can't do many things, and I'm afraid that when we're adults, some of the insecurities we have go back to our childhood. You know, when those insecurities were formed back then. So of course, anything we could do as parents to instill confidence in our children is very important. Of course, the difference between this story and Little Star is that Little Star, if you remember, was really a story about love. The star sacrificed himself for the baby Jesus. He burned himself out, warming the baby Jesus Christmas Eve. So that was a demonstration of true love.
Right, sacrificial love, right.
This book, on the other hand, is about faith, the power of faith to make you strong. So that's the way I look at it. Little Star is about love. This book is about faith. Now all I really have to do is come up with a children's book about hope, and I'll have all the main virtues covered.
There.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, speaking of virtues, this book is dedicated to Bonnie and Jerry Horn. Now, obviously, I know Jerry Horn very well. Why don't you talk about Jerry Horn?
Oh, my goodness. Jerry Horn has been my colleague at Priests for Life for about 15 years, and he is one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever met in my life. He's my best friend. He is just a tremendous pro-life warrior, but at the same time, he's also a great fundraiser. He's a great media person, and he's just an all-around outstanding, unique
We actually got him on the Journey Home one time a number of years ago.
Yes, and it was a great episode of Journey Home. Right. And he loves everybody at EWTN, and he'll be very happy that we talked about it.
We got to do that also. Now, you also have here, to the one who touched and changed my life, Hosanna.
That's the illustrator, Richard Caudry. Right. You know, one of the reasons I picked Richard to illustrate this book was when I was researching his biography, I noticed that in his autobiography, he thanked the Lord for all the blessings in his life. So I said, oh, well, not only is this guy brilliant illustrator, but he's also a committed Christian. So I took that as kind of a sign.
Now, also, the way you wrote this book in the kind of like the Dr. Seuss-like approach, that it was done in rhyme, was that a decision that you made from the beginning and it just came out that way, or you like to write in rhyme, you like to write poetry, what?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself a real poet, more like a bubblegum poet, but this book is sort of like, I guess, Dr. Seuss meets Jesus, and I do like Dr. Seuss, and I've always liked rhymes. Rhymes are very powerful. You know, I'm not, you know, some snooty academics like to look down on rhymes and poetry, and I disagree with them. I agree with G.K. Chesterton, who thought that rhyming was one of the most powerful and sublime forms of poetry. You know, there's something about human beings that we crave harmony and completeness, and when you see a rhyme at the beginning and at the end of something, it's sort of like making a circle, and you know, it gives you a feeling of a satisfying feeling. And it's also very memorable. You remember things. The first book I ever read was a rhyming book on dinosaurs, and I still remember it 40 years later.
Right.
So whenever I write a children's book, if I feel that I can write it in rhyme, I explore that. In this book, it worked out perfectly.
Now, in going through this, did you sit down and write all of the rhyming? You wrote it out, here's the whole structure of the basic book, and then went and said to the illustrator, these are the images, these are the tableaus that need to be created, and do that? Did you do it one at a time? Did you have the pictures drawn out with a general idea and then wrote the rhyming to go with it?
Well,
what was the procedure?
Well, I'm a pretty visual person, and now that I've written 3 children's books, I kind of know my way around it. So when I'm writing the book itself, I'm thinking in terms of visual images. So if I'm thinking as I write that, oh, this would make a great illustration. So when I've got the finished product, I already have a general idea of, well, you can do this, this, this. I don't have the exact image picked out. And then I met with Richard, and we went over it line by line, and we sort of had a collaborative discussion about what would be good. And so some of them I came up with, but Richard is very, very brilliant, and he came up with a lot of these illustrations himself, you know, and that's the beautiful thing about working with somebody who's really brilliant, because it's not all on your shoulders.
From the time you originally, you know, came up with the idea for this story, did it basically stay the same from that point on, or did it change in any way?
It really didn't change. I'm a very slow writer in general. I'm not one of these people who write thousands of words. With my adult books, it takes a long time. On the other hand, there are times when you get a thunderbolt of inspiration, you know, and you have an epiphany, and everything comes together at once. The format, you know, the words, and this is what happened in this case right here. It took me about a week to put together the text, and then it pretty much stayed the same until the end. And then it took him about, I don't know, probably about 4 months to do the illustrations.
Right, right. Now, the one illustration when he sees our Lord and my help is enough, it's all that you need, it's all you require in life to succeed. The weaker you are, the more strength I give. I'll be there to help you as long as you live, and it goes on and on. And that's when the donkey kind of realizes that maybe there's something there that he was missing. Now you kind of give a kind of a miracle type effect here,
oh,
right?
There's a miracle, all right.
So it's not just that that his self-worth is raised up. It's that there's a physical healing, in a sense, that goes on.
There is. There's a miracle. The donkey becomes strong. The donkey becomes powerful. You know, I took a little liberty with the story, but I kept true to the gospel message, and that is that when you're weak, that allows God to do great things with you, and that's the position we're all in. We're all donkeys, to use a euphemism. I know I am.
Well, Mother used to always say, "I'm just a donkey pulling the cart here."
Yes,
that's how she
we're
used to describe
all
herself.
weak, and life's problems. I don't care what kind of overachiever you are, how brilliant you are. You know, life's problems are too much for all of us. You know, just suffering is overwhelming. This world is a very tough place to live in, and there's just no way that you can do it on your own. However, God is bigger than all those problems. So if you could somehow manage to plug into that power source, the source of all power, then you'll be bigger than all those problems too. And that's the point of this. How do you plug into the power? How do you plug into grace? Through faith, through prayer, through the sacraments in our church.
But what do you say to someone, they look and they say, well, I'm one of those weak donkeys, and you know, at the end of the day, I didn't get the miracle. You know, I mean, I went to Mass and I felt better, but, you know, I wasn't all fixed and I wasn't all healed. How come I didn't get the miraculous healing like that other donkey?
Well, not everybody gets physically healed, but we all can get our soul healed. God will always help us when we pray to Him in faith, no matter what kind of problem we have. Sometimes God, in His almighty judgment, decides that it's better for us to go through the physical problem that we have. But we're always going to receive help. The prayer that God always answers is that He will always get you through the suffering. He will always get you through whatever problems you have. You don't ever have to collapse. You know, you don't ever have to lose your faith. You don't ever have to lose your peace of mind. And this is a great present to give your child too, because we want to protect our children. We don't want them to suffer. But there's no way that we could keep pain from coming to our children. Right. No way. But what we can do is we can give them something that teaches them how to respond to that, so that when the pain does come, they can make it through. You know, and by giving them a strong faith in God, in Jesus, we're giving them like an impenetrable coat of armor. And so they'll be able to make it through any of life problems with their sanity intact, with their peace of mind intact, with their faith intact.
Right, and this is clearly an Easter book. After all, his life after the donkey rejoiced that the king had made such a wonderful choice to help with the greatest mission of all. The king used the donkey, young, weak, and small. And then it goes on to a little picture of a little girl holding a stuffed animal donkeys, where you kind of say, so every year at Easter time, renew your hopes again. Remember how a little faith can give you strength, and then gather all your friends around and tell the tale of when a tiny donkey carried God into Jerusalem.
Yeah. Yes, it's an Easter book, but again, that's a message for all of us, children and adults, at all times. We always need that help. And God is always standing there to give it to us.
Right. Well, for a slow writer, you've written several books. What other new book are you slow writing now?
You know, the truth is I've got a bunch of these ideas jumbling up in my head right now. I've got about 2 or 3 ideas that might be good. I've got about 10 mediocre ideas and about 20 that are pretty bad. And over the next couple of months, I've got to sort through them and figure out what I'm going to do next. So if anybody in the EWTN audience wants to pray for me, I'll gladly accept those prayers.
We'll certainly do that. Let me ask you, when you first come up with these ideas, I think this is good and this one's not so good, have you found over some period of time sometimes the ones you thought were really good didn't turn out to be so good, and some of the ones you thought were passable, mediocre, ended up becoming the one to do?
Well, the first thing, a lot of the ideas I thought were good really turned out to be not good at all. Usually the ones that I know are bad are pretty bad. It's always, you can throw 90% of your ideas into the garbage pail. Right. Yeah, the good news is I have the ideas. You know, there are many times in my life, even now, when it's pretty empty up there and you don't have anything. So I'm just happy to have the ideas, and I'll sort through what's good, bad, and mediocre later.
Well, with all that work between writing and obviously the great work that Priests for Life does in the pro-life movement, we need them more today than ever before. And of course, Jana Marana working with you as well. And it's great to have you here. Keep up the good work all the way around.
Thank you, Doug.
Best to Father Frank. Doug Keck here, speaking with Anthony DeStefano, author of I Just Can't Take It Anymore, Encouragement When Life Gets You Down. And also, for the kids, The Donkey That No One Could Ride, perfect for Easter, both available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.